Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Biome. Now, I'm not going to teach you guys the mini expansions. So there's 2 mini expansions. I'm not going to teach you that. I'm also not going to teach you the advanced mode. I'm just going to teach you the standard mode of the game. Okay? So let's get started and I'll show you guys how to play Biome, the standard mode. Okay? So here we have a score. Basically score chart here, score tracker. And in order to win the game, you need to have the most victory points in order to win, okay? But there's actually three different ways that this game can end, okay? One of the ways this game can end is if a player reaches 120 points, which is this finish line, basically, okay? That's one way the game can end, all right? A second way the game could potentially end is there is a max amount of rounds in this game. So you'll notice we have 3 years here at the top, 3 years, and in each year there's 4 different seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer, okay? Well, each season is 1 round. So basically each year there are 4 rounds, okay? And so if nobody reaches the other 2 requirements in order to end the game, then the last requirement will be once you finish summer at the end of year 3, okay? So the 12th round ends the game that way, okay? So that's 2 ways you can end the game. Now let me show you the third way. Okay, so the third way the game can end is if a player manages to put an animal in each one of these locations in all of the different habitats, okay? So we have the marsh habitat, the prairie habitat, and the jungle habitat. If there's a card in each one of these locations, each 6 locations, in each of the 3 habitats, and that's another way the game can end. So like I said, 120 points, all of the cards are filled up in 1 player board, so 1 player has managed to do that, or if none of those have been achieved, then you play a certain amount of rounds, 12 rounds, and then that's the way the game ends. That's how the game is going to end, right? Now, how do you get victory points in this game? A number of ways, okay? So, all the cards you play, except for the 2 starting cards, which are here, okay, and we'll get to that momentarily, but all of the cards have a point token at the top where their name is. So when you play a card, you'll get points for playing it, okay? You'll notice they each have an action. We'll get to actions later, but some actions that you can activate, or you decide to activate, can potentially score you even more victory points. Hence, this stout could potentially give you 8 victory points. And this Sumatran striped rabbit also could potentially give you 7 victory points, okay? So that's another way you can score points. So that's 2 different ways you can score points. Another way you can score points is if you have a predatory animal. If you have a predatory animal in your biome, so your biome is all of this, okay? Your biome is both the marsh, both the prairie, and the jungle, okay? But these are separate habitats, but it's all one biome, okay? So if you have a predatory animal and you are able to successfully prey upon an opponent's baby animals, you can get victory points that way, okay? So that's another way you can get victory points. And if you have baby animals that were not eaten by a predatory animal, at some point you can feed them to score victory points, okay? So those are the main ways you can score victory points. There's also one other way you can score victory points. So the game starts with a permanent achievement card, which is that one there. But then you randomly draw 3 more achievement cards, hence this one here. And if you're the first to achieve this particular one, you could score 10 points. Also, if somebody basically achieves this at the same time as you will share the victory points of 10, just so you know. And then if somebody was to achieve this after you, if you're playing like a 4-player game, the 3rd person gets 3rd place, not 2nd place. So just make note of that. If 2 people go here, no one is going here, okay? But then the 3rd and 4th player can still potentially claim these for some victory points, for instance. So achievement cards. So you're going to want to try to complete one if you can. okay? So that's another way you can score victory points in this game. Okay, so I've taught you guys how to end the game and how to get victory points in this game. So let me teach you guys the flow of the game next. Okay, so each round has a few different phases, okay? So first of all, you'll notice this is going to be what tells us what we can do, okay? This whole section here, all right? So if it's your first round, you'll start at where it says draw cards. But then every preceding round after that, you will reduce your hand limit size down to 8. So if you have more than 8 cards when that happens, you have to discard down to 8 cards in hand, okay? And then you can do the next thing, which is draw 2 cards. Then you can collect 2 resources of your choice, okay? So these are the 6 different resources that you can claim. They're sun, fish, rodents, leaves, berries, and insects, okay? Bugs, insects, okay? And then the last one here in this segment of these 4 actions is you can play a card. Now, this is all done simultaneously, so your opponents can collect resources at the same time as you. You can draw cards at the same time as your opponents, which is 2 cards, and you're going to do it in that order. 2 cards, then draw, then collect resources, and then play a card if you are able to, okay? So that's the idea, okay? Now, I forget exactly what it is, but if you are unable or choose not to play a card, I think you can either collect a resource or draw a card as like a consolation prize. Don't quote me on that, but I think that is what I remember. I never had to do that, so that's why I don't know for sure. I think I read it in the rule book, but I'm not 100% sure. So just make note of that. That's something you might want to look up yourselves to see if that's true or not. But I didn't have any issue playing any cards because I always had enough resources to play something, okay? So everyone's going to do that simultaneously. And yes, you're only going to play 1 card, okay? That's what you're going to do. Then, if there is a seasonal event, you'll take care of seasonal events. However, fall and winter do not have any seasonal events in the standard mode of the game, so you won't have to worry about that for the first 2 rounds. But you will in spring, and you will in summer, and we will talk about these, okay? But first, let's continue with the flow of the game. So after seasonal events are taken care of, then, one at a time, starting with whoever's the first player, and the first player is going to get a fox token, so they know that they're first player for that round. This gets given to another player in the next round, so this is going to get cycled. So everyone has a chance to go first, okay? So one at a time, each player is going to activate one of their cards. What does that mean? Okay, so let me show you. Okay, so at the beginning of the game, each player is going to get 1 bird and 1 plant, okay? They randomly get an animal, or should I say a bird, for either the jungle, the prairie, or the marsh, okay? So they randomly draw a bird card, and if it's going in the jungle, then it's going in the jungle, and they'll get a jungle plant, okay? There's only 1 plant for each of the 3 different habitats anyways, just so you know. But there's more than 1 bird you might potentially get, but it doesn't matter because they each only give you 0 victory points to start with anyways, so you're not getting that kind of advantage. They also have very similar abilities too. So all of the plants are going to have a similar ability to this as far as the starting cards. So these are the starting cards, okay? And all of the birds are going to have a similar ability. It might be a different resource, but they're basically going to be the same for the starting birds, okay? Anyways, so you'll notice we have 2 actions here. So when you are going to take that, activate 1 card, okay, you can choose one of your cards you already have in play here. And since you start with these in the beginning of the game, and when you take these, you can kind of, place them in any row you want within that habitat, sort of orthogonically, so they can't be diagonal, okay? Can't be diagonal, just orthogonically, okay? So anyways, so you might already have some animals, but you might play another card before you get to activate one of your cards. Then you're going to choose a card that you have to activate, okay? So for instance, this one says give a point to an opponent, and we'll get to what that means later. then you can play a jungle card worth up to 4 victory points for free. So this gives you, and this card gives you another way to play cards. So that's cool. You can play a card that's worth 4 points or less for free. You might have something like that in your hand. So make mental note. That's pretty cool, but it has to be a jungle card too. So you might have something worth 4 victory points, but if it's not a jungle for this particular ability, then obviously that's not going to work. But you could have one of the others, you know, one of the starting plants for one of the other areas, like the marsh or the prairie, for instance, okay? But that's just an idea. This one says you can get 4 insects, and you also get to draw a card. And then all other players may get 1 insect for free. So that's a nice action. So when you take an action, however, you will put a cube down onto it that tells you you've activated that, meaning you can never activate an action ability again, okay? So playing a card, the card you play does not have to be activated the same turn you play it. In fact, you might never activate that ability ever, because, you know, we have, so let me zoom out. So we have all these locations where cards can be, okay? And you'll notice we have 6, 12, and, well, 18 here, all right? Well, if you'll notice correctly, there's only 12 rounds in the game. So if you somehow did not reach 120 points, and somehow a player did not fill in their tableau here of cards, for their cards here, then at most, you would only be able to get to activate 12 of your 18 abilities of the cards you play, okay? And so because you already start with 2 cards and you potentially play a 3rd card in just the first round, you've already got 3 cards to potentially choose from. And if you get these abilities where you can just keep playing cards for free, or other potential bonuses that let you play cards, you might have several options, but you're never going to get to activate every single action that you play. So make a mental note that you might have some really cool abilities, but at most 12 is going to get activated. But in an average game, 8 to 10 cards will get activated of your cards out of 18 potentially, right? So make mental note, every card you play, you may not get to activate, okay? You won't get to activate. So you're gonna have to definitely pick and choose sometimes. Sometimes you're just playing a card for a variety of other reasons, like maybe you don't really care too much about the ability, but you need another reptile to complete the herpetologist achievement, for instance. So, you know, sometimes you're just playing cards for other reasons besides just for their ability. Now remember, you play a card, that card does not have to be activated on the turn you play it. It could be at the end of the game when you finally activate it, if you so choose. So you're still going to choose which ability you want to activate, and only 1 per round, okay? Just 1. So that's how the flow of the game is going to work. Now let me explain nesting, because nesting is very important. So nesting is going to take place, well, partially through the round. So when you get to spring, what you're going to do is you're going to draw your cards, you're going to get your resources, you're going to play your card. Obviously, you're going to make sure your hand limit's down to 8 before you draw cards, okay? But then, once everyone's done their play a card, because it's simultaneously done, so once everyone is done with that, you are going to do seasonal events, which is nesting for spring. So what's going to happen is you're going to get a bird nest, and since everyone starts with a bird and a plant, potentially everyone's going to have already one bird and one tree that can have a bird nest on it. So only trees can have basically a bird nest for birds, okay? There's 3 different types of plants in this game. We have trees, we have flowers, and we have miscellaneous plants. So for birds can only nest in trees. They can't put a nest in a plant. They can't do it in flowers or the miscellaneous plants, okay? So right now we already have an equation where we can put a nest down. You'll notice this tree even has 2 half nests on the card. That means that you could literally have 2 birds that share this tree for nests. So if I had another bird here, I could have a second nest here. Also, each bird tells you how many babies that they're going to have. So this scarlet macaw here tells you it's going to have 4 babies. So during the nesting season, you're going to put down your nest and you're going to get your 4 birds. Okay? Here's 3, 4 birds, and then you're going to put them into your nest. And they're going to stay there. And that's it for the spring season, okay? You're just going to do that. Now, it's not just birds that can have nests, okay? It's not just birds that can have nests. Rabbits can also have nests. Now, the thing about rabbits is they can have a nest in any plant. So, for instance, we have a tree here. They can put their nest in a tree, but they could also do that with any other plant potentially as well. So a flower is a plant. So technically, this rabbit here can have a nest with this plant, okay? Because of that speciality, okay? And all rabbits will always have 6 babies. So it doesn't matter on the species of rabbit. All rabbits will always have 6 babies, okay? And then if that was the case and we had those 2 cards out, then we'd have ourselves another little nest between the 2 of them, like so, to indicate we're using that plant for 6 baby rabbits or bunnies. So 4, 5, and 6. See? And then you'll just put them in the nest. And there we go. So now we have 2 different types of nests here. And that's all you would do for nesting season. You're not doing anything else for the nesting season, okay? You're not scoring points at this moment for nesting season. Okay, then we have summer. So you're going to do your summer round just like normal, except when seasonal events activate. Then the first thing that's going to activate is going to be, so let me zoom in. The first thing's you'll notice we have 2 things that can happen in summer. First, we have predation, number 1. And then number 2 is feeding. We'll explain feeding, but you can't do feeding until predation has been activated, okay? So that's next. So hold on, let me zoom back out. Okay, so predation happens. So what's going to happen is your opponents can attack your babies. So I don't have to have any predators. My predators are not going to hurt my babies, okay? But my opponent's predators can. So for instance, if my opponent had this golden eagle, he could potentially activate his predator ability. The problem is, the golden eagle, if my opponent had this golden eagle in their prairie, meaning it's not going to be here because this is the same player board, but if my opponent had this card, this golden eagle cannot prey upon these animals because this is a different habitat, okay? They're not, and this isn't in the same habitat. So make mental note of that. This would have to be in the same habitat in order to attack, okay? But there's a big consolation prize if you can't attack or if you have a failed attack, okay? Now, let's say, for instance, my opponent had this anaconda in their jungle. Then they could attack one of my nests. Now, when you're playing 3 or 4 players and you have a predator, you're going to choose which opponent to attack, okay? Attack the player who has the most points. That's the most logical move, unless they don't have a nest in the jungle. Then obviously not, right? But anyways, what you're going to do is you're going to choose an opponent to attack that has a nest in the jungle. Now we have 6 here, and we have 4 here, okay? At most, your predator at most is only going to kill 2 of the babies. So your predator will never kill all your babies unless you only had 2 babies to begin with. Then, ouch. But like I said, that's what's going to happen. So what you're going to do, if my opponent had this anaconda, then they could choose to attack. So what they're going to do is you're going to see how many plants are in that jungle, okay? So here we have the water lily, and we have that sour sop tree, for instance, right? It's right here, right? So there's 2 plants here. That's protection, okay? The more plants you have in a habitat, actually makes it harder for an opponent to attack you, because what you're going to do is your opponent is going to roll a dice, okay? And they have to score higher than the number of plants you have in that habitat. So for instance, since there's 2 plants here, my opponent would have to roll a 3 or higher, okay, in order to successfully attack my baby animals. They'd have to roll a 3 or higher, all right? So more plants means more protection from those would-be predators, okay? Now, if you do manage to, you know, roll high enough, ooh, that wasn't high enough, right? But if you do manage to roll high enough, and there we go, then you're going to take out 2 from the chosen nest. So let's say my opponent decided he wanted to, you know, chow down on some of these rabbits here, okay? They're just going to take 2 out, basically, of the nest, okay? They're gone, back to the resource bin, and then you're going to score 2 points for every baby you basically took out of the game. So 4 points. You're going to score 4 points right away. So that's how that's going to work for a predator attack. Now, if you have multiple predators in the same biome, then you could potentially get way more points than that too. So that is also a possibility, okay? If you have multiple predators in several different habitats or in the same one, you can potentially do a lot of damage. Now, if you were not able to successfully attack your opponent's baby animals, like let's say I had rolled that 2 earlier, you know, my first roll was a 2, it wouldn't have been high enough. So what you're going to do, if your attack fails, you're going to get to draw 3 cards as a bonus, as a consolation prize. Not a bad consolation prize, getting to draw 3 cards. Also, if your opponent didn't have any nests to attack with your predator, then you still get to draw 3 cards. So that's amazing. And because this is a predator and doesn't have the action thing here, you can use this predator every season of summer. Isn't that amazing? So if you get this played early on, 4 summers, there's 3 summers in the game at max. So potentially you could use this animal twice in the game for its attack, maybe 3 times. Okay? So that's how that's going to work. Okay? So I've explained how all of the seasons are going to work, with the exception of feeding. So if you are the player who has these baby animals, if you want to score points with them, you're going to have to feed your baby animals. So here we have these rabbits, these baby rabbits. They have to eat either leaves or berries. So let me move the board a bit. Each player is going to start with a certain amount of resources. They're going to start with 1 of each resource. So we have the fish, we have the rodent, we have the bugs, we have the berries, we have the leaves, and we have the sun. The sun resources are to play plants, but then the rest of these are to play the animals, okay? So in order to successfully feed the remaining bunnies here, I'd have to feed them either plants or berries, okay? Now, that means that, unfortunately, 2 of these babies are going to go hungry because I only have 1 of each of these anyway, so I can only at most feed 2 of my bunnies. Of course, my macaw up here, I still have to feed these babies up here, and they eat insects and berries. Oh boy, but I only have 1 insect. So at most, I can only feed 1 of those as well, potentially. So there's going to be a lot of babies going hungry. And that means you're not going to score those victory points. But if you do manage to feed a baby, every baby you feed successfully by paying the resource that it's supposed to eat or it can eat, you're going to get 2 victory points, okay? So if you did manage to feed all of these rabbits, which is 4, and all of these birds over here, these baby birds over here successfully, you could get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 points. That's a lot of points to score in 1 round. But that means a lot of resources down the drain. So you have this as an option. You do not have to pay the resources to feed the animals. You just won't get those victory points. That's the only problem with that. So you want to try to feed them if you can, but you don't have to, especially if you need these resources to play a card. So let me get to that. So let me get to that in a moment. But after the season of summer is done, what you're going to do is you're just going to dump these birds and these rabbits back into the storage bins, and the nests will leave your board. So these are going to be on your player board during spring and summer, and then fall and winter, these are going to be gone. So just so you know, they don't stay on your board forever, okay? So that's how that's going to work. So then, let me explain how to play an animal. So we haven't explained that yet, or plant for that matter. So these two will always start in the game. But if you want to play an animal or a plant, you have to pay, let me fix that. You have to pay the resources on the left side of the card. So if I wanted to play this water lily, I'd have to pay 2 suns to do so, okay? As in, I'd have to have 2 sun resources, okay? If I wanted to play this striped rabbit, it doesn't want to zoom in very good. But anyways, if I wanted to play this striped rabbit into my jungle, I'd have to pay a leaf plus another leaf plus a berry. You have to pay all of the resources, not your choice of one. You have to pay all of them, okay? Now, there is obviously some ways you can play them for free. Remember, this one lets you play an animal up to worth up to 4 victory points for free. There are animals that are worth 7 victory points too, so just so you know. And so that's a possibility. Then you wouldn't have to pay the resources if you got to play it for free. Also, let me explain the scoreboard a little bit. Hold on. Oh, and this isn't obviously all the cards. It just, there's a lot of cards, and I didn't want to obstruct the view of this board. So, whenever your player character, your token, passes a bonus, you're going to get that bonus immediately. So there's 3 bonuses that your first player token is going to, or not your first player token, but your player token is going to pass over. So if I'm the blue player, I've got the koala. If I'm the purple player, I've got the penguin. If I'm the red player, I've got a kangaroo. If I'm the yellow player, I've got a giraffe. So when your figure reaches 4 points, for instance, which is 4 points here, or passes this, okay, what's going to happen is you're immediately going to get a sun resource for free, okay? So that's one of the benefits, one of the bonuses you can get. Another bonus you can get is drawing a card. So if I go here, or I pass here, I get to draw a card immediately, okay? And then if I ever land on this purple thing or pass it, what's going to happen is it's going to let me play a card for 1 fewer resource. So for instance, I have a berry and a leaf currently, but I don't have 2 leaves. I could choose to just pay a leaf and a berry and then play this card. So 1 resource cheaper. So make mental note that as you score points, you're potentially going to be able to play a card for 1 fewer resource. And that's going to happen 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay? But it can actually happen more than that. So you'll notice, I might have mentioned earlier, that there was an ability that lets you give an opponent a victory point. So for instance, if I wanted to play this sour sop tree for its action, so if I wanted to activate its action, play its action, I could give a victory point to an opponent of my choice. So what's going to happen is, let's say if I had this koala right here, and my opponent was like right there, I could go down 1, giving him a victory point, causing him to go up 1. Now, there's another benefit to doing it right at that exact moment. That will cause me to go back down 1, meaning I'm no longer on this bonus, which means that the next time I get victory points, if I land on it or pass it, I'm going to get that bonus again. Isn't that amazing? So you can score these bonuses potentially again if you play a card that gives you, that lets you pay a victory point to an opponent. That's perfect timing, if I do say so myself. That would be an amazing time to do it, okay? So that's how that's going to work, for instance. That's how that's going to work. So, and that could work for the card or the sun's bonus as well. And so you'll notice while the play a card for 1 fewer resource only happens 3 times, there's multiple card bonuses throughout this whole thing. and multiple sun bonuses throughout this whole thing. So just make mental note of that, that's potentially going to happen if you do play a card right at a certain time. Now, there's some other things to think about as well in this game. So let me zoom out again. Occasionally, you are going to draw this card as one of the potential cards you can draw, which is called Changing Conditions. And this can be played at any time on your turn. What this basically does is it extends one of your habitats. So for instance, maybe you're not playing a lot of animals into your prairie, and you need another place to play another marsh animal, but your marsh is now completely full, but you still have room here in your prairie. You can play this card here into the prairie, and you can say that this is now part of your marsh. Okay? That would work for scoring purposes. That would work for abilities and things like that. That works for all of that. So that's nice. So now, hey, there's 7 spaces for a marsh. Okay? That's how that's going to work. But that does mean that there's only going to be 5 now for the prairie. You've just made the prairie shrink. And there are those changing conditions for prairie to jungle as well. And there's a few of these, so you might get one. So that's another thing that could potentially happen that you can do on your turn at any time. Now, another thing that you can do anytime on your turn is at any time you can exchange 2 resources of your choice for 1 resource of your choice. That's something you can do at any time on your turn. Another thing you can do at any time on your turn, you can discard 2 cards for a resource, or you can do it to draw another card. So maybe there's a couple of cards here you don't want to play, or they're not going to work for your strategy or something like that. You can discard them to draw a card, and then, or you can either, like I said, you can either discard them to draw a card, or you can discard them to get a resource of your choice. Okay, so that's another thing you can do on your turn. And remember, your hand limit is 8. So at the end of the round, if you have more than 8 cards, you're going to have to discard down to 8 anyways. So you might as well just do that ahead of time for that extra resource. Okay, but if you had 9 cards and you only discarded 1 card and you chose not to discard anything else, then you're not going to get that extra resource. So make mental note. You get either a card or a resource per 2 cards you discard, okay? And like I said, you can do this at any time during your turn. You can discard these cards, okay? So that's how that's going to work. So those are some of the extra abilities that you could potentially do. There's another thing. You'll notice we have this coin here. There are some abilities that you could play as an action that let you flip a coin for either heads or tails. Heads might give you victory points. Tails might give you resources. So there is ways of getting to utilize this as well. I'll let you, find that out for yourselves as you play the game. But there are some interesting coin abilities as well. So basically, I think that is everything you need to know in order to play your first game of Biome. That's pretty much everything. Like I said, there's lots of different abilities. Also, there is a handy card you'll have that tells you what all of the icons mean, okay? So, if you don't know what something means on your card when you're going to get to activate it, you can just say, oh, what's this icon? Oh, that's what it is. There's also only 2 scavengers in the whole game, so if you get the one of the 2 animals that are scavengers, that's what that icon is going to mean if you get it, okay? And then we have the icons for the different types of plants. There's an icon for mammals, an icon for birds, an icon for reptiles, and an icon for miscellaneous animals. Miscellaneous animals are usually insects, but they can also be amphibians, okay? So make mental note of that, all right? Also, all birds can have nests, so as long as they're attached to a tree. Also, each tree has a limit of 2 nests. Another thing to note is there are going to be some cards you might draw that have multiple colors on the border. So this water lily can either be played into the jungle or it can be played into your marsh because of that. So make mental note, you can play some cards in different locations, okay? Also, sometimes you might play a bird that can go in the other biome, but it's next to a plant in the other biome over here that's the same color as well, because it has more than one color on it, hence this water lilies. There's some birds that are going to have this 2 different color thing. And so if you don't have 2 nests attached to this plant here, you only have this one here, and you had a bird here that matched this color, even though it was over here, but matched this color as well as this, then you can actually have a nest between these 2 locations for this bird and plant. Even though this plant is here in the jungle, you could say that this jungle is just at the edge of this prairie, basically. So that's another kind of an interesting, game rule that might not be easily understood, but that potentially can happen as well. So, so that's just some of the many interesting things about this game. And like I said, there's lots of other things for you to discover on your own, but that should at least get you through your first game. Also, you'll notice we have even different icons for the different players. So if you see this icon with 3 on it, it says other players, meaning all other players, okay? If you see just 1, means another player. And if you see this thing that says players, but that has a plus, then it's 1 or more other players, okay? So for instance, there might be a card that says, give 2 cards and 1 resource to other players, okay? So if there's 3 people playing the game, you could give 2 cards to 1 player and a resource to the other player and choose not to give the other player anything. That's what that means, kind of. You can kind of spread them out or in a certain way. Also, there is also a catch-up mechanism. Once you make it to year 2 and 3, okay, at the beginning of each round, the player in last place on the scoreboard here is going to get 1 extra resource or 1 extra card for the round as sort of a catch-up mechanism. So they might be able to draw 3 resources instead of 2, for instance. But I think that's everything you need to know in order to play your first game of Biome. I hope you guys liked this how to play video, and I hope to see you guys again next time. Please like and subscribe if you liked my video. Bye.